Arsenal take on PSG, in the Champions League. But first, Crystal Palace. That shows it, doesn't it? That PSG is on my mind. Arsenal take on Crystal Palace in the Premier League tonight, but very much with one eye on that big Champions League game. And you feel it's probably a similar headspace for Crystal Palace, who, of course, have an FA Cup semi-final on the horizon. That's a massive game for them. We're going to preview tonight's game. We're going to discuss some of the latest transfer rumors, and we're going to take your thoughts and questions from the live chat on this live episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Let's get into it. You know it's going to be a good day when you mess up the intro. Welcome back to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast, people. Hope you are all well. Happy Wednesday. I had big plans today. Big plans. I was going to do the podcast this morning, and then I was going to spend the day in the garden, finishing off the heavy lifting that I started last week. I got quite far, but still got a fair bit to do. And I thought, you know what? I haven't got a great deal on this afternoon. I'll put in a nice shift before I head down to Emirates Stadium. But it is chucking it down with rain. It is cold. It is miserable. And I can tell you from now, I will not be spending my afternoon in the garden. So, new plan. Got to think of something else to do this afternoon before tonight's game. Big good morning to everybody joining us in the live chat. I can see there are a fair few of you with us. Guitar Solo says, are we still 30 subscribers away from 39K? I'll tell you exactly how many we are away from 39K, because I'd love to get there, because I kind of want to do this whole road to 40,000 thing, but I can't do it until I get to 39 at least. We are, at the time of recording this, 7 subscribers away from 39,000 here on YouTube. That doesn't include all the wonderful people that listen to the Chronicles of a Gooner via Apple or Spotify. And there's probably, looking at the numbers, about the same number on that side of things as well. So we've built up one hell of a community, which I'm incredibly proud of. Thank you to every single one of you guys for your support. I know there's a lot of people that watch and listen that don't necessarily get involved in the comments section as well. You are appreciated too. Every single person that tunes into the content is very, very much valued. I can promise you that. What are we going to do on today's pod? Well, we're going to build up to the Crystal Palace game tonight. We're going to reflect on some of what Mikel Arteta had to say in his press conference yesterday. We're also going to talk a little bit more about Viktor Gyokeres, because there are some suggestions that Arsenal's interest in him is hotting up a little bit more. We're also going to talk a little bit about Ollie Watkins' situation. I think it's a really interesting discussion, given that we know Arsenal tried to sign him in January. That wasn't a deal they were able to do, or at least willing to do, for the price that Villa were looking for. But that's a really interesting situation, because he continues to be left out of Unai Emery's side. He played at the weekend. He was fantastic. But you get the sense that Ollie Watkins is maybe done at Aston Villa. So we'll get into that. We're also going to touch on the quite heartwarming news, actually, that Norwich and Cardiff are going to go head-to-head with two men in the dugout that we're very, very familiar with, in Jack Wilshere and Aaron Ramsey. I felt for a while, given what he was doing with the kind of youngsters at Arsenal and given the way he was speaking, that Jack Wilshere was going to head into coaching. Aaron Ramsey, I didn't really see that one coming. I'll explain a little bit about why a little bit later on in the podcast. But before we dive into the bulk of the content, if you haven't done so already, please leave a like on the video. If you're watching us on YouTube and you're a regular by now, you know what you're going to get. So leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. Help us get to that 39K mark. We're 7 people away. So come on, give us a subscribe. Also, if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, leave us a review. And if you'd like to go one further and support us on Patreon to bring you more content, you can do so by visiting the link in the description, patreon.com/the Chronicles of a Gooner. You can join for free to get a feel for what we do. And from time to time, we do open the Patreon content up to our free members on there. But you can subscribe by scrolling down. You can find the membership tier there, and you can join us, and we can bring you more, basically, if you like what you're listening to. Okay, shall we get into, to begin with Mikel Arteta's press conference from yesterday? What were some of the key takeaways? So, if I'm being honest, we were all quite worried, weren't we, watching the Ipswich Town game when Bukayo Saka went down under that horrible challenge from Leif Davis, and it really, really was a horrible challenge. Studs down the back of the Achilles. It's never nice. It's always a really uncomfortable one. And you always worry when it's an Achilles problem because anyone that's ever suffered from that type of issue will know they're really, really difficult to recover from. So I was concerned and I was worried at the time. But the fact that he got up and he played on, it did give me encouragement. When he came off, he had it sort of wrapped in ice, and there were some maybe distressing images on your TV screens at that point. But the general consensus was that he's going to be okay. Mikel Arteta kind of said after the game that they didn't feel it was anything particularly serious. And the fact that he's reiterated that in yesterday's press conference is a good sign. And he did say that he's got a good chance of playing tomorrow, which is, of course, now tonight. On Jorginho, it looks like he's going to be out for a few weeks. The situation is improving. Mikel Arteta stopped short of ruling him out for the remainder of the season, but obviously it looks like the PSG game is going to come around a little bit too soon for him. Now, normally, I'd be okay with Jorginho being unavailable. Do I think he brings something to the squad? His know-how, his experience, his intelligence, his ability to kind of slow down the rhythm and the tempo of a game when that's what's required. These are all brilliant kind of things that Jorginho brings to the table. But I'm more worried about this and more concerned than I'd normally be because, of course, we've got no Thomas Partey for that first leg. He picked up a really stupid yellow card at the Bernabeu. And while I was really annoyed at him at the time, I didn't want to let it cloud over the joy that we knew we were about to experience because it was getting closer and closer to the final whistle. And our position was an incredibly comfortable and commanding one. And I also tried to be realistic in my kind of analysis of this, where I went, you know what? We went to the Bernabeu, we won. We were never going to come through that completely unscathed. There was going to be something. There was going to be some issue. And so when I look back on it, I tried at the time to kind of play it down, and I tried to be really sort of level-headed about it. But actually, the closer we get to the PSG game, now with Jorginho injured, the more I think about it, the more annoyed I am that Thomas Partey would be so silly in that moment. Would be so careless in that moment. I understand, right? Football's an emotional sport, and I understand that Real Madrid were on a wind-up. He's got an Atletico Madrid past, which would have certainly impacted how he was treated, not just by the supporters, but also by some of those Real Madrid players as well. So I get it. Like, I'm not saying I'm perfect. Maybe I'd have risen to the bait as well. But I just think the more I look back on it now, the more annoyed I am that he did bite and he did get himself yellow carded. On Thomas Partey, Mikel Arteta was asked about his contract situation. Now, we've been going back and forward on this a little bit. There was what I felt was a hint a few days ago from Mikel Arteta that actually those talks were ongoing and that, the club were very clear in what they want to do. That was kind of the message that Mikel put across. Then the following day, there were reports that came out that completely rubbished the idea of Thomas Partey signing an extension, and that actually there'd been no offer. There is no offer forthcoming, and that Thomas Partey is going to leave in the summer. He was asked about it, Mikel Arteta, in this press conference by Sky Sports' Gary Cottrell, and Mikel again deferred. Like, he deflected onto Andrea Berta. Now, Andrea Berta's come in, and that is very much his responsibility. I'm sure there's some steer from the manager, and there's some steer from some of the other people within the football club. But it feels to me like Mikel Arteta is very keen now that Andrea Berta has come in. He's someone with broad shoulders. He's been there, done it. He's very experienced. He's very keen to say, look, you need to take the responsibility for your side of things. I'm not going to be drawn into that. I need to focus on the football stuff. I need to focus on the here and now. And so he's pushed that onto Andrea Berta. And let's be honest, we're not going to get anything out of Andrea Berta with regards to this. We're only going to know, I think, when a deal is either close or when a deal is completely dead. So yeah, we'll find out. But at the minute, I think, don't get excited one way or the other. Not that you'd be excited about him leaving, because I think he's a really good and important player to us. But I guess be open-minded about where this one is going. Mikel was asked about resting players. Obviously, we've got that game against PSG to come, but we've got the advantage of not having a game at the weekend, which I think is really, really positive for us. I think the fact that we get 6 days is key in a number of ways. And I talked about this a little bit yesterday, so I don't want to go over the same points, but very, very briefly for maybe those of you that didn't catch yesterday's show. I think it's not only significant in the sense of you get 6 days, and I think Mikel Arteta said in the embargoed section a little bit later on that the players are going to get a couple of days off before the real prep begins for PSG. But not only do they get that time to go and refresh and recharge ahead of a really important game and recuperate physically, but they also get the opportunity to really study a game plan, to learn the game plan, to take in bit by bit, and to really, gain a full understanding of what it is the manager wants ahead of the game. Because we talk a lot about the fitness aspect of quick turnarounds, and we talk a lot about what happens when a player is asked to play every 3 days from a physical standpoint. What we overlook a lot of the time, though, is the fact that there's very little prep time, from a tactical perspective, from a staff perspective. And so that is really, really important as well. And I think, we benefit in both ways from the fact that we get a little bit of a break. Calafiori was the subject of some questions. There were questions about whether there's concern around him. Listen, he's had a really rotten season when it comes to injuries. There's no getting away from that. I think we've all seen what Ricky Calafiori can bring to the Arsenal side. He's an incredibly bold and brave player. Very, very impactful in an attacking sense. Still some question marks for me around him defensively. I think that's fair to say. But the injuries were my biggest concern before we signed him, looking at his history. And they continue to be almost a year after we've signed him. So, where do we go with this? Is it a case of, it's the first season, he's adapting physically. There's been a bit of rotten luck in there as well. He's not the only one that has suffered from some really bad luck over the course of the season. Do we draw a line under it at the end of the season and we go again and hope that we manage him in a more effective way? Mikel kind of alluded to that, didn't he? He said that we've learned many more things about the player and we now know what we need to do to try and prevent them. So that gives you some encouragement. I'm not quite ready to write off Ricardo Calafiori because he's a player that I really like, and I think he's a player that has plenty of uses. But there's going to be eyes on him next season. There's going to be a lot of sort of revisionism around that signing if he continues to break up or to pull up as often as he has. Now, one of the points that Mikel was really keen to get across was the fact that actually most of these have been impact injuries. And so if they're impact injuries, I guess that's less to worry about. Now, on the one hand, you could flip that and you could say, well, if he's suffering from a lot of impact injuries, it shows that he's not very robust. And it shows that, he's not able to recover in the way that certain other players are. I mean, Bukayo Saka's probably had a ton of impact injuries over the last few years, the way people sort of kick him around the grass. But I think with Calafiori, you have to allow for the fact that he's adapting from the Serie A to the Premier League. And I think if you don't, then you are doing him a bit of a disservice, in my opinion. So I think you have to accept that. I think you have to acknowledge that. But obviously, eyes will be on him next season because we want to ensure that this player that we paid a vast amount of money for and who's shown some real positive signs in a lot of ways is going to be of use to us. Otherwise, what the hell was the point in bringing him in? So, look, we're going to be focusing on Calafiori quite a bit, I'd imagine, at the start of next season. How does he kind of fit in? Miles Lewis-Skelly's taken his place and has shown zero signs of giving that up, by the way. He's been fantastic, the young man. So, the jury's out around Calafiori still. Not so much because of what he brings as a player, but because of that fitness record, which for sure people are well within their rights to be concerned about at this stage. One final bit I wanted to touch on from the press conference, then we're going to move on. Miles Lewis-Skelly. the question was put to Mikel Arteta, is his best role now at left back? When he first broke into the team, it was Miles Lewis-Skelly's a midfielder. He's filling in there. He's covering there. He's doing a marvelous job. Great. He's done a bit of a Bukayo Saka in the sense of an opportunity presented itself, not necessarily in his natural position, but he came in and he grabbed it with both hands, and now he's established himself as a first teamer. And you don't expect anytime soon Miles Lewis-Skelly to be looking back. He's on his way now. But Mikel Arteta said, I wouldn't go as far as saying that left back is his role. He's very comfortable in midfield, talked about his ability to play as a 6 and as an 8. And so it kind of feeds into what I've been saying for a little while, which is when it comes to that midfield rebuild that we all know has to happen in the summer, there will be a consideration for Miles Lewis-Skelly as a midfield player. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to play there every week, but if you get Calafiori back fit, and he can play at left back. If you've got Ben White back fully fit, you've got Timber as an option there as well. Tomiyasu, let's hope that he gets back to fitness sometime soon. You know, he can play on either side as well. All of a sudden, there isn't a huge need for a left back anymore. And you're in a place where you are now looking at Miles Lewis-Skelly as a midfield option as well. And I think if it's his natural position, central midfield, and that's where his heart is and he really wants to play, then let's give it a go. But I feel like he's got an opportunity now to establish himself as Arsenal and England's left back for, if he wants it, the next decade. And so it's a bit like that. Do you remember the Ainsley Maitland-Niles situation where he kind of came in and he was playing as a fullback and he was adamant that he didn't want to be a fullback, but he got goals in midfield and he never really delivered and he never really produced to the level that we wanted. And then sort of it was like, well, if you don't want to play right back, you're not going to play. And his career kind of took a bit of a downward turn ever since then. I don't want that to happen to Miles Lewis-Skelly. I don't think it will. But I think this whole dream of moving into midfield, if it is indeed what he wants, I think it should be something that he parks, just because he gets to do a lot of the things that he would do in midfield from left back in this Arsenal system. He's not playing as a traditional fullback, which limits him in his ability to carry or to drive through the middle of the opposition, etc., through the middle of the park. He gets to do a lot of the things that he would enjoy, I'd assume, as a midfield player, playing at left back for Arsenal, because that's what our system allows. He just needs to tuck in at left back off the ball and defensively. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, let's see how it goes. But it was interesting that Mikel Arteta didn't close the door to the idea of Miles Lewis-Skelly moving into midfield at a later date. Right, we're going to take a short pause. When we come back, I'm going to discuss with you guys the 11 I'd like to see play against Crystal Palace tonight. Also still to come, some Viktor Gyokeres chat, some Ollie Watkins chat, Wilshere versus Ramsey, and we'll take some of your questions and thoughts from the live chat. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Like and subscribe. You know the drill. Like, subscribe, sign up, leave reviews, all of that stuff that I'm always constantly banging on about. Please do that. It really, really does help. Let's move forward then. Should we discuss the 11 that I'd like to see Arsenal field tonight against Crystal Palace? Before we do that, in fact, let me give you a couple of interesting stats around the head-to-head between Arsenal and Crystal Palace. Now, Crystal Palace's only away win at Arsenal in the last 31 years was a 3-2 victory on the 21st of April 2019. It's the 23rd of April today, so I don't know if you want to read into that in any way, shape, or form. The Gunners have won each of the previous 6 meetings in all competitions, scoring a total of 20 goals, and that sequence includes a 3-2 home victory in the EFL Cup back on the 18th of December. So pretty good record against the Eagles of late. The Gunners have avoided defeat in 11 consecutive league and cup matches, so we're not an easy side to beat these days. We've only lost 3 of our last 36 Premier League home matches, with the only home league loss of the campaign coming against West Ham back in February. Arsenal are unbeaten in each of the previous 42 top-flight home fixtures in which they've scored first, which suggests if we get the first goal, we'll be on fire. Gabriel Martinelli has scored 6 Premier League goals against Crystal Palace, more than against any other opponent. That includes 5 in his past 6 top-flight appearances against the Eagles. So yeah, lots of good stats too, as well as the maybe slightly concerning ones. But anyway, let's get into the starting 11 that I'd like to see Mikel Arteta pick, because it's a difficult one, isn't it? We're 6 days out. We'll be 6 days out from the PSG game. So there isn't as great a need to rotate as there might be under different circumstances. If we were playing at the weekend again, and then we had the PSG game coming up on the Tuesday, then you look at that slightly differently. But we've got time to have a bit of a sort of a breather after this. And I think, from what we know of Mikel Arteta, from what he's been saying in the media, he feels that rhythm is really, really important. And so there'll be a lot of players that you or I would like to see wrapped up in cotton wool and kept as far away from Emirates Stadium tonight as possible. But I don't think that's the way it's going to go. So taking that into consideration and trying to figure out what I think would be a sensible lineup based on the principles that Mikel Arteta will want to apply, this is what I've gone with. So my team is Raya in goal. I've gone with Ben White at right back. It was great to see him in the side against Ipswich from the beginning at the weekend, and to see him complete 90 minutes. And he looked like he was working his way back towards his best. Maybe because we played on Sunday, there'll be a feeling that this game has come around a little bit too soon for him. Maybe he doesn't get through 90 minutes, but I would certainly start him, because I think it's important that he builds up his fitness and sharpness, because we're going to need Ben White. He's a really, really important player, whether that's at centre-back or at right-back. And, we're one injury away at centre-back from having to call on him or Jurriën Timber to go in there. So I'd like to see him play. I'd continue with Saliba and Kiwior at centre-back. I know that, we're all really nervous every time Saliba in particular takes to the field, because with Big Gabby out, it feels like his importance has increased. And that is right. He's become the leader of that back line now. You can see it in his body language, in the way he applies himself. Kiwior's been great. I think the rhythm of playing regularly, the benefits of that are really clear to see when it comes to Jakub Kiwior. So let him continue there. I'd play Zinchenko again at left back. I don't think there's any need to risk Miles Lewis-Skelly. And I think Zinchenko in a home game, it's fine. The other thing that I probably neglected to mention a little bit earlier on is, yes, we have one eye on PSG. And I did touch on it briefly, but Crystal Palace have an eye on the semi-final. And their semi-final is this weekend. So they don't have the luxury of an extra few days. So I'm really interested to see what Ollie Glasner does in terms of his team selection. Is he going to shake it up? Is he going to change it quite significantly in order to protect against potential injuries or fatigue ahead of what's a massive game for them? They're not going to finish much higher in the league, if at all. They're also not going to get sucked into the relegation fight. So for Crystal Palace, a bit like us, it is very much all eggs in the cup basket now. My midfield would be Partey, Merino, and Odegaard. The one I'm going to give a rest is Declan Rice. I know that normally Declan Rice doesn't get a rest, and normally it's because Declan Rice doesn't need a rest. But I really do feel like, of the players that we have available to us, he is one of the very most important right now. And he's also one that could do with a breather and could do with a break. So I know he's always chomping at the bit. I know he always wants to play. If I was predicting what the 11 is going to look like, rather than sharing with you guys the one I'd personally pick, he'd probably be in there. But Partey didn't play at the weekend. So I'd play Partey, Martin Odegaard, who I thought started to play his way into form the other day, and we need that. So keep it going, keep him moving. Merino can play as the left A in place of Rice. And then in the front line, I'm going to play Trossard, because I think Trossard probably needs to play against PSG, because we're going to have to drop Merino into the midfield by the looks of it. And if he can build on the confidence from scoring a brace at Ipswich the other day, that will only serve us well going into the big game. Martinelli can continue on the left. We talked about his record just then against Crystal Palace. and I want to see Ethan Nwaneri come in on the right-hand side. The two I'd protect then are, obviously I'm protecting Lewis-Skelly and I'm protecting Timber as well, but the two that I'm really keen to protect tonight are Rice and Saka. So that's my 11. Let me just reiterate that for those listening on audio. Raya in goal, White, Saliba, Kiwior and Zinchenko across the back, Partey, Marino and Odegaard in midfield, with Nwaneri and Martinelli playing either side of Leandro Trossard. So that's my team to face Crystal Palace tonight. Let me know your thoughts. Let's get some of your thoughts. Rob says, just on Tomiyasu, who I mentioned there, he was told that his injuries are serious, and it's almost likely he'll never be able to play at this level again. He won't play for the Arsenal again. Very sad, because he was a super squad player when fit. I don't know. I've not heard that. I have become increasingly frustrated with Tomiyasu's fitness issues, because, as you say, he's a really, really useful squad player. The fact that he can cover in a multitude of positions made him a really sort of attractive buy. We made that purchase. His Arsenal career started really well, I thought. But yeah, if he's not available to us, then all of those advantages that you get from having a Takahiro Tomiyasu in your squad, they don't mean an awful lot, do they? Guitar Solo says, if Lewis-Skelly stays at left back, he'd only be happy with it at Arsenal. Any other team would not want him inverting the way he does for us. Yeah, and that's kind of the point I was alluding to, is that in our system, in our setup, it works. And so he might be less sort of frustrated by that, if indeed he is at all. I'm not sure that he is. I've not seen any signs of that. But if he really does believe he's a midfielder, the fact that he can do so many of the same things playing from left back in this Arsenal squad, I think will help him stay level, stay grounded, and not see him get that kind of level of frustration that maybe Maitland-Niles started to feel at one stage. And yeah, I think that was the beginning of his end at Arsenal, really. What else have we got? Imran says, to be honest, I really don't care much about this evening's result. The best outcome is no player injuries, please. I agree with you that that's the best outcome, but I also really want Arsenal to finish second. I want that to be done and dusted. I think it's really important that we finish second, because it will demonstrate that even in a season with all the troubles and issues that we've had and all the frustrations, that second is essentially our bottom line. And that's a really healthy place to be when you consider a few years ago we were scraping, trying to fight for the top four, to be in a place now where we've in a lot of ways been at our worst. We've been nowhere near the level that we've seen over the last few seasons, but to still manage to finish second under those circumstances, I think would be a real huge positive. What else have we got? Raz says, would you prefer to drop points tonight to screw over Liverpool's celebrations, or watch Tottenham suffer on Sunday? That's a really good question. Look, I'm over it, man. The title's gone. Liverpool are going to win it. Whether they win it now or in a few days' time, I don't really care, to be honest with you. We're going to have to give them a guard of honor anyway. So, you know, however it happens and unfolds from now on, I don't really care, to be honest with you. I get the feeling that Liverpool fans, not all of them, but some Liverpool fans are a little bit agitated with the fact that we've made it to the Champions League semi-finals. And this is just based on my group of mates, right? I'm not going to label everyone the same or anything like that. You know, it's that's not right. That's not fair. But I do look at sort of the way some of them have reacted to us making the Champions League semi-finals, and it feels like they believe, certainly in my friends' cases, that it's almost overshadowed the fact that they're going to win the league. Like, they hate it. And so if we go on and win the Champions League, I couldn't care less. Right now, I did care at the beginning of the season, and I did care for long periods. And when it became apparent that we were out of the title race, I became very disappointed and frustrated and agitated. And we start to do all that stuff, don't we? Where we be revisionist and we look back at why, what went wrong, who's to blame, all the rest of it. But at this stage in the season, it's all about the Champions League for me. They're going to win it, whether they do it today, tomorrow, the day after, it doesn't really make the world of difference to me. Congratulations to them, because they have been the best team in the Premier League. They deserve to be champions on that basis. And yeah, we move on. Right. Shall we move on to some other stories? I'll give you a very, very quick prediction of tonight's game. I'm going to go Arsenal 2, Crystal Palace 0. That's going to be my score prediction for this evening. Right. Really, really brief pause. When we come back, we're going to chat Gyokeres. We're going to talk Watkins. We're going to talk Wilshere versus Ramsey and more. We'll get your questions and thoughts from the live chat too. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Welcome back to the pod. Okay, let's start working our way through some other stories then. Fabrizio Romano has been talking about Dean Huysen or Housen. I think it's Huysen, the Dutch centre half. Well, I say Dutch. I think he plays for Spain. He's clearly got a Dutch name though. He is attracting interest from a number of clubs, it seems, and it looks like Arsenal are one of those clubs. Now, we've been linked with him before. It won't come as a surprise to you to read that a very prominent journalist is making that link. But, I mean, for me, I don't think he's someone that we would go after unless we were going to let Jakub Kiwior go. Now, I think Huysen's release clause is something like 50 million quid, and is he better than Kiwior? I mean, I said a few weeks ago that I felt like if the club believe his ceiling is higher than Kiwior's and they're going to generate some money from a Kiwior sale come the summer, then maybe you look at that and maybe that's something that you explore. But based on the recent showings, I mean, Jakub Kiwior's been fine. The problem is with Kiwior, it is not necessarily how we view it and what we desire from our side as a football club. It's more what the player wants, because he's come into the side and he's been fantastic. And hopefully that continues. But there will be a part of him, I'd imagine, come the end of the season that believes, well, look, I've made all this progress. I've done great. But if I don't then get rewarded for that, i.e., if I'm going to drop back onto the bench and watch Gabriel and Saliba play 37 of the 38 Premier League games next season and I'm barely going to get a sniff in Europe, then what's the point of me staying here? So I think my stance on Kiwior and the knock-on effect that has on our interest in Dean Huysen is totally dependent, really, on what the player feels is best for him. If he wants to stay at Arsenal, stay. Stay. The last few games have very much changed my mind on Jakub Kiwior. Guitar Solo says, H, you said he was better than Kiwior and had a higher ceiling. I do think he probably has a higher ceiling. Well, at least I did think that maybe a few weeks ago, but Kiwior's impressed me. Like, I'm allowed to change my mind. People change their mind all the time. You should change your mind based on the evidence that you're presented with. But as I say, the really kind of key thing with Kiwior is as well, where's his head at? Where's his head at? Also, Jack makes a great point. Cash in on him while his value is high. If you think he's going through a bit of a purple patch rather than this being a reflection of his actual level, then maybe that is the right thing to do. These are decisions that the club needs to make. But also, Jakub Kiwior is going to have a big say in this, because if he's not happy playing second fiddle, which he will again when Gabriel returns, then he's got to consider his future. And if his stock's high, that might be the right time for Arsenal to cash in as well. Let's take a couple, or let's go into a couple more stories before we go into your questions. Former Arsenal teammates Jack Wilshere and Aaron Ramsey, both currently in interim management positions. Norwich for Jack Wilshere, Cardiff City, the club of his heart, Aaron Ramsdale. They meet on the final day of the season. Now, from what I can see, Cardiff City are in 23rd place in the Championship. So there's an opportunity for Wilshere to relegate Ramsey. I kind of touched on this right at the beginning of the pod, but I'll just expand on it a little bit. I expected Jack Wilshere to be a manager someday. I expected him, when he left Arsenal to go and become a coach at Norwich, I expected him to embark on a path that would ultimately lead to him being a manager or a head coach someday. I think he talks a good game. I think he's done good work with some of our younger players at Arsenal, and I think he's got a growing reputation in the game. Aaron Ramsey, I've met Aaron Ramsey a few times, and maybe he just didn't like me, but I never felt he was much of a talker. And I never felt that he had that kind of personality that I'd want to follow if I was a fellow pro or a player playing under him. I don't know. Maybe I just misread the guy and got it completely wrong. But, he's got an opportunity to kind of start to build a reputation for himself for when, he deems it the right time to move into potentially management or coaching by, pulling off something really, really special with, as I say, the club of his heart, Cardiff City. They are on 43 points. And Derby County, who are in 21st, are on 46, and there's 2 games to go. So it's not beyond the realms of possibility because it's going to take an almighty effort and results to go their way. So, yeah, we'll see how that goes. But I got to be honest, Wilshere, not surprised by it. Ramsey, I'm very, very surprised by. Never really had him down as a potential manager. Graham Bailey has reported that Arsenal sporting director Andrea Berta is becoming increasingly keen on signing Viktor Gyökeres, whatever that means. We know that he's a player that Berta likes. We know that there is a credible link there already. I feel like this is just a reiteration of a previous report. I mean, what's happened in the last few weeks? Is it because of the background checks that Arsenal have allegedly been doing? Have they come back really positive, and has that increased the want to sign him? There's been a lot of talk about his price. Feels like he's going to be available at a similar price point now to what Benjamin Sesko is. And I've said for a while now that if they're available at the same sort of price, then I'm probably going for Gyökeres over Sesko at this stage because I want a win now solution. I'm not after a solution for the next 2-3 seasons. I'm after a win now solution. Let's not forget as well, Kai Havertz is still here. Gabby Jesus ain't going anywhere for the time being. So, we're unlucky right now that our 2 centre forward options are injured. It's not like we don't have any alternatives. Whoever comes in, yeah, we'd spend big money on them, but they'd get to share the role probably with someone like Havertz, who I think has been really good and was on course for a 25-goal season, by the way, prior to his injury. Now that's across all comps, of course, but that is the kind of number that the naysayers and his biggest critics would have told you he was incapable of getting anywhere near. So that shows you, that he's been much more effective than people ever wanted to give him credit for. Add to the equation as well, that top quality Spanish centre forward that goes by the name of Mikel Merino, who's been tearing it up front for Arsenal. And yeah, go and get the win now, guy. That's what I'm really, really keen to see us do come the summer. One last thing I wanted to touch on before we go solely into your questions, and there are a couple coming through. I'm just going to star some of those just to make sure that I don't lose them. Hold on. Let me start that one. Okay. Ollie Watkins. What do we make of his situation right now at Aston Villa? Because I feel a little bit sorry for him. He's been a massive part of getting Aston Villa into the mix for the game's biggest prizes and all the rest of it. He barely played in those Champions League games against PSG. I think he got 20 minutes in each game. He only got 15 minutes yesterday against Manchester City. And we know that Arsenal were keen to sign him, or at least Mikel Arteta was keen to sign him come January, and it didn't happen. And it didn't happen because Arsenal, from my understanding, deemed what Villa were asking for to be completely unreasonable for a player of that age, for a player at that stage in his contract, etc., etc. And they didn't want to deviate too much from clearly what they believe was the summer plan. I still think it was a mistake that we didn't do it. I think whenever you watch Ollie Watkins play, you can see that he carries a goal threat. I thought he was sensational against Newcastle the other day. Unlucky not to score 5 in that game. He was really, really good. Where are people's heads at on Watkins now? Because let me just have a quick look. What is, I know his age. I know he's 28, 29 years old. Bear with me. Let me just do a little bit of Googling here. Let's have a quick look at his contract situation. I beg your pardon. Hay fever is wreaking havoc on me at the moment. At least I think it's hay fever. It must be. Okay, Ollie Watkins, 29 years old. He turned 29 recently. He turned 29 in December. He's got 15 goals in 34 appearances in the Premier League this season, which is pretty good. He's got another one in the Champions League as well. So he's still doing it, still doing the business. His contract expires 2028. So with his contract set to expire in 3 years' time, he's going to be, what? If he's 29 now, he's going to be like, what, 32, 33 by then? You'd argue that Villa probably want to get rid of him or cash in on him. Get rid is probably a little bit harsh, but probably want to cash in on Ollie Watkins before he gets to the final year of that contract. It was said that they wanted about 45 million in January. And I was okay with it because I felt like we were in desperate need of that option. And so it was probably us paying, if we did go through with it, in my estimations, in my mind, an extra 10 mil. But our situation was so desperate with the injuries, I felt like it was kind of okay to sanction that. It didn't happen in the end. Is he someone that you go after in the summer, as well as one of the options that you really kind of do believe is a future thing? So let's say, for example, you don't get Gyökeres and you go for Sesko. Would you like to see Arsenal just commit a little bit more and bring in Watkins and Sesko? One is a ready-made and one is a future kind of type player. And I know that that's asking for Arsenal to lay out a lot of money. And the reality is that we probably don't live in a world where we're going to see two forwards come in, two central forwards come in at least. But I don't know. I'd be tempted to do that. You know, if you could negotiate the right price with Aston Villa, I'd still be open to this. And I like the way Ollie Watkins is talking. You know, I know there'll be others that say, and I'd imagine some Villa fans will be of the opinion, look, the team's doing well, generally speaking. Yeah, you've been a major part in getting us there, but with that evolution comes greater competition. And with that competition comes the possibility for the manager to rotate. That's what he's doing. He's trying to keep things fresh, etc., etc. And they'll feel like Watkins coming out and saying stuff like, you know, I was fuming I didn't play against PSG is unhelpful. They'll feel that it's rocking the boat at the real business end of the season. And I've said throughout the campaign, I think it's imperative that Villa qualify for the Champions League. But also there's a part of me that kind of likes the fact that he's got that fire in his belly still, and that he's like, well, hold on a minute. I played a huge part in getting you from where you were to where you are today. And I almost feel like you've been disloyal to me by leaving me out in these games and bringing in Marcus Rashford, who has come in on loan and, you know, okay, has been good at Villa. You can't deny that. Like, the upturn in Rashford's form has been incredible. But he probably feels like, hold on a minute, where's the loyalty to me? You know, I'm the guy that fired you here, scored a lot of goals, contributing in a lot of ways, worked tirelessly up front, always with a great attitude. And then we get to where we've been fighting to be, and you push me to the side and bring Marcus Rashford in. Unai Emery will have his reasons. He'll say it's a tactical thing. But for me, again, this is an example of where Unai Emery can mismanage. And I think as a boss at the highest level, you got to make ruthless decisions, right? I think that's part and parcel of the game and part and parcel of your role. But if I were Watkins, I would feel aggrieved. I completely get where he's coming from. And I just wonder if that situation that now exists, and obviously Villa were willing to let him go, by the way, before that huge John Duran offer came in from Saudi Arabia. You just get the impression that because of that situation, you might be able to negotiate a pretty appealing price for Ollie Watkins come the summer. And so if you wanted to do that bit of business in addition to something else, that's a possibility. Like just throwing it out there. Just throwing it out there. Right, let's get a few of your questions. We'll answer a few of those before we wrap up. Quick reminder, if you haven't done so already, leave a like on the video. Can we check in where we're at on likes right now? Let's have a look. Let's have a quick glance. Hold on a second. We have got just the 74 likes on the board. Come on, guys. There's no reason why we shouldn't have 150. Look how many of you are watching us live right now. Also, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. We are now 2 subscribers away from hitting that 39k mark, which means we can begin on the road towards 40,000. So please do get involved there and help us. Okay, I will take a really, really short pause, and when I come back, we're going to do your questions. So start throwing them in. We'll pick up 3 or 4 before we wrap up today's show. Okay, then let's see what you guys are saying. I've favorited a couple. Raz says with the lap at 30 million, available at 30 million allegedly, and this morning talks of Osimhen at possibly 40 million. Would this change your striker target? This is a really interesting question. Honestly, no. Is probably my instinctive answer to this. First of all, if I'm saying that Benjamin Sesko is a bit of an experiment still, and if I'm a little bit worried about whether or not he's going to develop in what I want him to be, then I have to say the same about Delap. I think Delap's shown signs that he's on his way to becoming a real good striker, but I do feel like the jump up from Ipswich to Arsenal is too big. I'd have liked to have seen him compete in a competitive Premier League side, first of all. I'd have liked to have seen him in a squad where there's more competition. I'd have liked to have seen him play in Europe. And I know that these things are out of his control, right? And they shouldn't be a slight on how he's viewed as an individual and as a player. But I still think Delap is very unproven. And so if I'm beating the drum of, I'm not sure about Sesko, because for me, I think he's still got more to prove. And I still think that he's got more potential than quality right now. I'd be a hypocrite if I then said, oh, well, go and get Liam Delap. Do you see what I mean? So for me, it doesn't really change things. And also on Osimhen, if you'd have asked me this 2 years ago, I'd have been all over this. I'd have been all over it like a cheap suit. But right now, no, not for me. Not for me. I'd still prioritize Gyökeres or Sesko, or obviously the ideal scenario is Isak over Viktor Osimhen. If we exhaust those options and it doesn't feel like we can do a deal at what we believe to be reasonable, and things get silly and things get out of hand, then am I against pivoting towards the likes of Delap and Osimhen? No, if the price is right. But they're not. The news of those guys potentially being available at 30 and 40 million respectively doesn't change my thinking, which I think is what you're asking. John says, do you think that the report saying that RB Leipzig are looking for 100 million euros and the Gyökeres reports saying that his price has come down to 55 million pounds is the reason Arsenal have seemingly changed stances? So just to provide a bit of background for maybe those that haven't been following this, it felt like Sesko was the one for some time because we all were under the impression that Gyökeres was just unattainable. The 100 million euro release clause that we kept hearing about that Sporting have in place, excessive, ridiculous, crazy amounts of money. And I was very vocal at the time in saying that I don't think Arsenal should be paying anywhere near that for Viktor Gyökeres. Recently, that appears to have changed, and it looks like he's going to be available at a much lower price. And we're also hearing recently that where Benjamin Sesko could have been available for 55 to 60 million, RB Leipzig want more. Again, like I was under the impression that there was some kind of release clause around Benjamin Sesko or some kind of agreement in place. Let's have a look. The 5th of March, Benjamin Sesko is understood to have a sliding scale release clause in his contract. So that was the case previously, but the contract extension was thought to have removed his release clause. So it appears as though the release clause that I believed was in place has now removed that release clause, in which case they could demand whatever they want. I mean, it doesn't mean they're going to get it, but they could demand it. So maybe the removal of that release clause, if indeed that is accurate. Let me just read this a little bit more. Hold on, because I'm reading hold on a second. Hold on, just bear with me. I don't want to give you wrong information. So, okay, so it was understood that this release clause was removed. Okay, it stood at 65 million euros, which was around about 54.2 million pound at the time. Arsenal and Chelsea both expressed interest in the Slovenian striker last summer, while Liverpool, Manchester United, and Tottenham are all monitoring his situation. Several of England's top clubs are searching for firepower, with Sesko having emerged as one of Europe's best young number 9s. The 21-year-old has scored 17 goals in 31 appearances this season. This was back in early March. Sky Germany have revealed that Sesko's deal still contains a release clause, but it can fluctuate on a sliding scale. The current one is 70 million euros. That could increase, though, before the summer, according to the report. It is dependent on several performance-based metrics, including games played and games scored. So basically, we have no effing idea of what his release clause is going to look like come the summer, because they've got something in place that is kind of sliding scale that will adapt and that will change based on how many games he plays, how many goals he scores, etc., etc. We don't know the ins and outs of that. But basically, in a nutshell, long story short, the release clause that we knew to be in place previously has gone when the extension happened, the contract extension. And now it's one that, whatever way you look at it, is going to lead to us paying a lot more money. So your question, to come back to it, and sorry I've gone around the houses, I just wanted to make sure I had a fuller understanding of the picture. Your question is, do I think that because it seems Gyökeres' price has gone down while Sesko's has gone up, that is the reason for the shift in priority, as we're led to believe? You could be right. You could be right. But I also do know that Andrea Berta has been big on Viktor Gyokeres right back from his Atletico days. So it could be partly down to that. John goes on to highlight that Bild reported yesterday looking for 100 million euros. It could be partly down to that. But Andrea Berta has been tracking this guy for a while. He's arrived at Arsenal. That must have played some part in the kind of outlook around those two strikers moving forward. But it's a really, really interesting point. Do I want to sit here and tell you that it's purely a money thing and that's why Arsenal have shifted priorities? Maybe. I don't really want to say that because I don't know that. And I know that can drum up and create the sort of narratives that are just really, really unhelpful. We'll see. We'll see what happens come the summer. They're both decent options. Right now, I prefer Gyökeres out of those two. Okay, guys, I'm going to love you and leave you. Well, we've been running for about 52 minutes, which is a pretty long time to be talking by yourself. We are now 1 subscriber away from hitting that target. So if you haven't done so already and you're watching us, please do subscribe to the channel. Leave a like on the video. That really, really does help. Join us on Patreon if you'd like to as well. There's an extra bit of content coming tomorrow with regards to the Crystal Palace game. So now's a good time to hop onto that. Your support is very, very much appreciated. Leave us a review if you're listening on Apple or Spotify. And I will see you all on the next episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner, which will be at our usual time of 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. We'll be looking back on the game against Crystal Palace and picking up on any other Arsenal-related news to come out of that. I'll see you all then. Until then, take care of yourselves. Thanks for the interaction. Thanks for listening. I'll see you all soon.